how we are changing the future and we're building the irresistible future we want to see come through in Africa. And I think you're doing an amazing job. And I would love to start, instead of introducing you, I want you to introduce yourself. Who is Nneka and what have you been up to lately?
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. My name is Nneka Ukay. I currently work with Innovation Support Network, for Nigeria's largest community of innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship hubs. So we have incubators, accelerators, maker spaces, and skills spaces all within our network. We have over 120 members within our community all across Nigeria. And our work covers community for the ecosystem, partnerships and collaborations and linkages with funders, people like Axum and Green Tech, development partners, corporates, academia, collaboration amongst hubs themselves, as well as we do a lot of policy work as well. And basically, we're primarily focused on increasing the sustainability, visibility, and viability of Nigerian hubs. Our SDGs are basically around 8, 9, 10, and 11, which have to do with employment, innovation, and partnerships.
Love this. Thank you. So I see two angles we can go through it. I want to start what brought you as in your journey. How did you land in ISN? Where do you come from? What is your background?
Okay, it's a very interesting and very boring story as well. I have a background in marketing and business strategy. I've worked in organizations like British Airways, Virgin, a couple of financial institutions. And I was doing marketing consulting for a media tech organization. And then this opportunity came up and a couple of people sent it to me, and I wasn't really sure why at the time. Part of my background at some point a few years ago, I stepped out of corporate because I had to be primary caregiver to an elder loved one. And while I was out of work per se, I wanted to start doing something from home. So it was very random. So I started a business out of my home, and it was actually kicking off. Eventually, I registered the business. I got a team, but I always knew that I wasn't going to be in that business. I was always going to go back to corporate, right? So for me. And at the time, I always used to tell people that I felt it was so important for everybody at one point or another to start a business, because there's so many learnings that you get in that whole process. It almost condenses your corporate journey and your journey to C-suite. All of a sudden, some of the things are no longer just concepts, right? All of a sudden, you're building teams. You're now working, and then for someone like me who had come from corporate, very structured units, and you work in a particular unit, so I'm either in brand or brand strategy or business strategy. All of a sudden, I'm doing everything. I'm in HR, I'm in operations, I'm in processes, and I really loved it, but I knew that it wasn't something that I could sustain. So I wanted to create that as an additional revenue stream and just have it as a business running parallel to my career. And in the process of doing that, I got into some entrepreneurship communities as well. And I now found that, again, some of the skills that I had from corporate were lacking in a lot of businesses. So I opened another small business focused on helping businesses, write their business plans, grant applications, articulating their position, I did a lot of coaching sessions for people who were getting grants, and I was like, oh, I mean, it's great. I really love that you're doing that. But again, I didn't see it as something that was part of my career journey. I just saw it as what I was using to fill the time. So when it was time for me to go back, again, because I was caregiver for a loved one, I couldn't go back completely. So I started with a contractual job. And I wanted to go all the way away from entrepreneurship because I was like, it was almost consuming me so much, and there's always someone who needs help articulating their idea, developing their business strategy, or there's someone who's trying to write a grant, but I wanted to go back to wearing the suits and the heels, So while I was at that position, the ISN role came up, and I was like, I'm not really sure because I'm trying to run away from this entrepreneurship thing, right? But then it was almost like a mix. Like I could do the things that I wanted to do in strategy and business building while also helping entrepreneurs. So I ended up as the executive secretary of ISN. Again, I believe it's all part of my career journey. And what I always tell people, especially younger people, is that, especially younger women, is that a lot of the times you don't understand that your journey is a process and that, your picture is a puzzle, and that there are different parts that are all coming together. Sometimes it's really fragmented, so you can't see what is forming, but the forming is part of the journey and you just need to enjoy it. So I'm now in this role where all of a sudden it seems like all the things that I've been doing for almost 20 years all come together and are all needed, and I can draw from the well of experience at any point in time to develop a strategy, apply for a grant, have a business development conversation with someone, or it's just very interesting and beautiful.
It's funny how you said my story is very boring, and then you just start describing. I built 2 companies, and I was in like C-suite in the biggest companies, and then it's like a huge leadership journeys. I want to celebrate that, just acknowledging that it's not like a normal boring story. Like I don't hear it like that. But what brought you, like where? My question is around empowerment, because you mentioned like, especially for women. So of course it rings a bell to me. And like we are a generation of women doing things that our mothers couldn't do before us, right? There's something happening here. How was your empowerment? How empowering was your entrepreneurial journey? That's where I want to go.
Oh, wow. It's very interesting because I left corporate in a hurry, right? And I didn't really know what I was going to do with the time. And, even the fact that I'd never been out of work, was just so strange to me, even though, I was busy, but I wasn't busy all the time. And even I needed a distraction from that reality. So I started the businesses, but I initially it was, like I said, initially it was a distraction, and then it became a need. When I started my writing solutions business, it became a need, helping people within my entrepreneurial communities. But like I said, I really believe, I'm always telling people, right, as much as you can, start a business. That experience for me, I feel like it condensed maybe 5 or 10 years of my leadership journey. Because like I said, all of a sudden you're doing everything, right? All of a sudden you're doing HR, you're writing job descriptions. The internet is such a great tool and a great resource, but I had to pull, again, this thing of pulling from your well of experiences. You never know what you need. Mm-hmm. I have some experience in product development, so I had to pull from that, and process development. I had to pull from that when I was writing SOPs for my business, when I was looking for how to make sure that, the business could function without me. I had to do space planning. Again, you're doing everything on a very bootstring budget. And again, even that, right? I came from a background where I was managing budgets, marketing budgets for Nigeria, West Africa, and then Africa in millions of dollars. And then all of a sudden I'm using Canva for design, right? I don't have, again, my career at one point, I was head of a design studio, an in-house design studio, again, because it was marketing. And I had designers at my beck and call. I would always have like 3 or 4 people working on any particular design or project at a time. And I would look, this doesn't really translate. This is not really what is this who we are? All of a sudden, it wasn't about that. And if you know anything about design, a lot of times creative directors, we can't design. We see and it's strategy. A lot of the time we can't design. And then for a tool that I wasn't familiar with, I had to become really acquainted with Canva really quickly. You're doing design, you're doing printing, you're doing packaging, you're shipping stuff, you're working till the middle of the night, sending out stuff. And I'm like, well, what is this? What are you doing? I was enjoying it so much. And then, a lot of the time, when you start out, your margins are so slim. Again, coming from, the kind of salary I was used to, I was like, how many of this will I sell to make my salary? And then of course, there's now the differences. Since I was teaching people, there's a difference between revenue and profit. So even when I say how many of these units will I sell, we're actually talking about how many of these 15% markup is going to make my salary. And all of a sudden it just looked really, it wasn't happening. And I was like, you know what? I mean, I love this. I love it, but this is not my life. I'm so sorry. And it was so incredible because making that decision, I was not able to develop a team. I was able to hire people, empower people, teach people things. Unfortunately, the business didn't survive COVID. For business, will not go into that particular business. But it was such an interesting and incredible journey. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade it for anything because the learnings, again, like I said, the learnings, I'm using them today. I know I'll use them in the future. All of a sudden, some parts of my project management experience that were just contextual concepts, they now became contextual, There were just a lot of things, again, just being like the root person or the central person, and then you now start, dividing up your role and saying, okay, I'm no longer going to be responsible for this. You're going to do this. And even the people that I hired, I had a small team, 3 people. They're all doing really well. One of them went into trading a product that was along our value chain, and she was able to do that because of the relationship she had formed while working with us, and the other 2 are all working based on the experiences they got while they were with me. So it was just really incredible, being responsible for someone's salary. Like if I don't pay you, you're not going to eat.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, it's very humbling. Like all of a sudden, end of month, it's no longer about me collecting salaries, about me paying salaries. It's very humbling, and it just puts a lot of things into focus. So when you now go back into paid employment, there's a different type of perception. When they now talk about an entrepreneur, you can really understand because you've been on the other side, you've been on the employer side, and now you're back on the employee side. So it's almost best of both worlds. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, it was so good. I mean, it's so important what you're saying because it's a piece of the puzzle of the life you're leading right now and the leader you are right now. How you are supporting entrepreneurs is also because you've been one.
Yes.
And is so important. And the shift in paradigm, because I was a lawyer before and then shifted to entrepreneurship and then went back to corporate and then back to entrepreneurship again. And you never do it the same, because first time in entrepreneurship is like a whole new world. You can, we imagine.
Like, whoa, what's happening here? What's happening here? Is this how you guys do it? Oh, this is normal. Okay. Okay.
we can't call marketing, as you said.
Yeah, like whose job is this? Who's supposed to be doing this? Oh, it's me. Okay.
Yeah, so I can relate.
So it's very interesting. And then I read something recently, and it said that the current Generation Z, that they're going to have, it was some study, and it said that they're going to have probably about, and over the lifespan of their career, they're going to have about 18 jobs, and they're going to transition through like 6 careers. And, it just, it spoke to me, because I've done some transitions, and then when you're within corporate, those transitions are not very major. It's almost like, either vertical or horizontal, but they're always within the larger space, and you can see, okay, this is what my career looks like.
Yeah.
But when, for instance, you go from marketing, for instance, to supporting a national network, what does that transition look like? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So how do you articulate it? How do you map that? So even for me, there's this constant learning and this constant need to it's almost like there's a space between where I was and where I am right now, and I need to tie that with some learnings, so that it makes sense to me, but just so it makes sense to other people as well. So there's always learnings happening, how to support community, how to build community. You can never have enough project management. Data is now really important. I recently finished a course with Cambridge on circularity and sustainability strategies. So there's always learning that needs to happen, because there's so much that's happening in this space right now, and not just from the entrepreneurship support side, not just from the national network side, but even from the sustainability angle. So there's so much that, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she was like, there's never been a time like this, right? There's so much information. You have access to anything you want. You can learn anything you want, except maybe surgery online, and, there's just so much that you can do, and you can fill in the spaces, fill in whatever insecurities you have, or whatever shortfalls in knowledge that you have, just so you can be a better person and support people better.
Oh, I can't agree more. I literally can't agree more. And how does it translate, like this shift going from corporate to running a national network, as you mentioned? How does it translate into your leadership, into your life, into the way you're leading? Because something that was really came up very strong when I met you was how driven you were by impact. How there are a few around me, especially, I interact with women leaders like yourself, and we are often driven, but I felt like a very strong sense of mission. And did it play a role, like this transition, or where does it come from?
Okay, so first of all, I'm Nigerian, so I'm naturally very passionate. But in addition to that, I think it's quite a few things. One is the fact that there's an urgency of now. There's so much that needs to be done. In Nigeria, where I'm from and where I live and work, there's a youth unemployment crisis. There's a general unemployment crisis. There are quite a few challenges that I really believe that entrepreneurship can help solve. Maybe not 100%, but we can actually move that lever. Even the climate crisis. What can we do to help businesses be more sensitive to the climate? Even though Africa is just like the unfortunate child. You know, we've done the list, but we're also suffering the most with the climate crisis. But again, there's a lot that can be done, right? And even in education, there's a lot that can be done. And also, for me, one of the biggest things that I carry along in my life is empathy. And, you know, there was something that I read one day and it said, oh, you're so wise. And then the person responded, it's not wisdom, it's trauma, you know. And if you've been through a lot of stuff, then you have no choice but to empathize with other people, right? So again, that experience of being an entrepreneur, you know, and for instance, you have a force majeure like COVID, nobody was expecting. Supply chains are fractured. Your staff has family that is ill. One of my staff, her father's family had a cassava farm, and he was working in Lagos, and that's how come she was living in Lagos, and she was working with me. And then when COVID started, because of the interventions that were happening, the palliatives that were being given to people, one of our base foods is made out of cassava. So all of a sudden there was this huge demand for cassava. And he was almost about to get out of work because his office wasn't really working because of COVID. So they all packed up and went back to their village so they could farm the cassava and make money from that. And they made a lot of money from that. You know, so how do you plan that into your business, for instance? And, you know, there's a parable here as well in one of our local languages, and it says, is the cocoa farmer's tree that didn't fall that knows how to farm, right? We all just, it's almost like, oh, there are no extra circumstances or situation X's that can happen to a business that can, you know, cause it to have crisis. And yet, living in a very interesting dynamic economy like Nigeria, there's a lot of X, Y, and Z factors. So if you've experienced all of that before and you've survived and you know what it looks like, what that journey looks like, when you're having conversations with people that are on that journey, it's a completely different position than someone that has never been on that side before, or has never had that conversation before, had that thought of, oh, what do I do about my business? Do I shutter my business down or do I keep going? If you've had that situation before, there's a different level of empathy. Yeah. If you've seen, for instance, women that have had to come out of the workplace because they had to provide care, excuse me, we've seen women come out of the workplace because they've had to provide care for their families before, and you've seen what that can do to the trajectory of their career. When you see them trying to do something, there's a different level of empathy, right, than the person who has never had a career break, so their career trajectory has been strictly diagonal, moving upwards. And then you see someone who their career has been like this, you have to stop, then you go down to come back. When you have a conversation with that person, it's different because you've gone through it. When you, again, see a business that the person pushing the business obviously doesn't have certain, you know, experiences that you have, and you have those experiences, you're not doing anything with it. And the person needs that. For instance, when I was doing a lot of small business support and strategy, it was almost like, listen, take it. The small business, they couldn't even afford to pay. But, you know, like, how do you help someone? How do you not help someone with strategy when, you know, you can see exactly what it is that they need to do? Or you can have that conversation with them so that they can own it and, you know, and then drive it. And it's so it's very difficult to explain in words what it feels like when you see somebody doing something that you and the person articulated together months or years ago. I see it now in some of the people that I helped, and sometimes it's just so humbling to say, I have the notepad where we wrote that thing down. Do you understand? Or I could probably find the text message where I said, listen, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was thinking about this for your business. What do you think? And all of a sudden, those people are doing those things and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, so me now being in entrepreneurship support is almost, I can't say that I could ever have drawn this line. I mean, I don't even know that entrepreneurship support as a phrase existed a few years ago, right? But again, a lot of experiences have come together, and for me, it's part of my journey. And you know, journeys involve bus stops and train stations, and you know, movement. So right now, I'm here. I don't know what the next train station is going to look like, but I'm going to enjoy my time here, and I'm going to get as much learning as possible, so that when we make the next move, like we've helped as many people as possible, and we can enjoy that journey. And again, for me, I really believe that life is a journey. And there's this phrase that says, you're not a tree. If you don't like where you are, move. There was a time when I literally embodied that, because there's so many experiences. If you travel, and I did work in travel industry for a long time, if you travel, you just see that there's so much beyond you that, you know, you just want to absorb as much as possible. So, you know, for me, sometimes, I'll give you an example. I have a sibling who's been in the same office for almost 20 years, almost the same amount of time that I've been working, almost 20 years. And the projection has been very, very nice, very safe. And mine hasn't been like this, but I've enjoyed every single part of it, every single part of it. And it's one of the things that I also tell people, right? Like, you can't map for every eventuality. You need to enjoy the journey, because there's so much more in you and to you than even you know.
Yeah, I can't agree more, 100%. And what does it look like now, the entrepreneurial support you're bringing to entrepreneurs? Because with ISN, there is the support to the hubs, and it translates into support to entrepreneurs. And I can see in the way you're describing all your journey, how the most transformative piece is you adding value to the human beings, to the entrepreneurs in their business strategy, and the impact you can have just through your wording. How is it integrated now into your new positioning and the new posture and you up-leveling at this level, and also with the ambition you have for yourself, for the organization, for Nigeria, for the entrepreneurs you're supporting and everything?
Yeah, so for me, one of the biggest things is supporting people. I think that's just like within my genealogy or whatever, right? So for me, it's so critical for us to develop a system where, as a national network, we're able to support the hubs, and as the hubs, they're able to support the startups, so that we have a real ecosystem of support that layers down. And one of the biggest things for me that I visualize in achieving that is developing the right relationships and collaborations, because the sum of the parts is more than the individual parts themselves. So if we're able to, you know, have partnerships with funders, development partners, academia, corporates, then we'll be able to create sustainable income lines for the hubs, either through collaboration, sponsorships, or projects. And because that's one of the biggest problems that the hubs have, sustainability. And then that way, they would now be able to provide more support to startups, and then they won't have that issue of, you know, just struggling for how to keep the lights on, literally how to pay salaries. They'll be able to focus on providing that right structural and programmatic support. So one of the things that we've seen, one of the challenges that we've faced in trying to do this, first of all, is that we ourselves are a relatively new organization. So we need to, you know, be more out there, let people know what it is that we're doing. The second thing, which is more strategic towards achieving the goals that we're trying to achieve as a national network is that we need to help the hubs become more viable themselves, because the hubs as well, a lot of them are almost like startups, right? In that they need a lot of support in developing their models. They need support in, in even accessing some of these opportunities and relationships. We want to broker those opportunities and relationships for the hub so they can focus on the stuff that they're doing. But we also want to make sure that that they have the rights, that we have something to sell. So, it's almost two ways. So we want to support them to give them access to opportunities, but we also want to support them so that when they have those opportunities, they're ready and they have the capacity to fulfill.
Yeah. And what do you see, how does this contribute to a bigger vision for what we are wanting to build, as a new generation for leaders for Africa? Because it is that impactful, and I really want to position that and acknowledge the kind of impact we're talking about.
Yeah.
How do you connect the dots?
Yeah, so for me, the hubs for me are like they can be so much more than a lot of people visualize them to be now. Hubs can be community spaces, safe spaces for young people, women, people, with disabilities. They can also be creative spaces. They can also be alternatives to structured educational spaces. And there's so much that people can do in hubs, through hubs, and with hubs. And those collaborations, those projects, we've seen, and we can see more coming, can help lift people out of poverty, can help us create solutions, can help bring children off the streets, can help youth engagement, can help move people, especially energies of youth. Youth, very vibrant, have a lot of energy. If it's not channeled positively, by definition, it manifests negatively. All of this can be galvanized strategically if we have supportive groups in safe spaces that are working together to create things. It's easier to walk into a hub to learn a skill or to develop a solution than it is to get an admission into a university, for instance. We're not saying that the hubs should become alternatives to the universities, but they're already doing some of that work. And we want to work with the university, we want to work with the academia, so that again, we have such a finely neat system that drives an innovation of a culture of innovation in Nigeria. And then that way we're able to, from different places, from corporate, from development partners, from public sector, from academia, we're able to address the issues, issues of poverty, issues of social norms, issues of quality of life, If we're able to drive those numbers through hubs with their structured programs, then we can start seeing really tangible solutions. And right now, out of Nigeria, we probably have just a handful of hubs that are very visible. And yes, we have about 120 in our community, and we know that there are at least 200 others. There are at least 200 hubs in various shapes, sizes, stages, across the country. So imagine if each of those hubs were able to directly influence 200 to 500 people every year. Just look at the numbers and then just see the ripple effects that it could have. And then all of a sudden, through the hubs, people are able to have connections to the entrepreneurs, to the startups. The hubs can be like validators for startups, which opens up the doorway to opportunities, funding, collaboration, visibility. So for me, it really goes beyond where community of hubs. For me, is just seeing what the hubs can really become as, just engine rooms of innovation and youth engagement and, solutions creators. That's what I just see. And we could have like several of those across the country, and that's for me, that's the vision.
Yeah, I often say in these chats, it often came up that really the hubs are the backbone of the entrepreneur ecosystem. Yeah. And without the hubs, we don't have like sustainable ground for entrepreneurs to grow. Yeah. And in Africa, more than anywhere else, I know, more than Europe or the US, for example, they're doing so much more than just entrepreneurial support. When you're talking about community and sustainability, it's what you're describing is basically social work. Yeah. Is social justice work. It's like creating safe spaces for the emergence of like generation of innovators, of creatives. And like the work of resilience, a lot of people just describe it as survival mode, but resilience is being literally able to be creative in the midst of chaos.
Yeah.
And these hubs, I see them like oasis of, of regeneration, to be able to be creative and to be innovative and to find belonging and to relate and connect to people who are going through the same thing, who are like-minded and everything. And it's so much more, it's so much more important than what what we perceive from the hubs as just a place where you go incubate a company, like if like it was disconnected from the entrepreneurial journey, or like it was completely, like it is a holistic approach, right? So when you speak, it really speaks to my soul, like it resonates.
So, for instance, when we see there was a recent study that was shared, and there was a study on hubs across Africa, and it showed that most of a larger percent of the hubs currently are like community shared spaces, workspaces, and stuff like that. But what we've seen is that a lot of the hubs that are doing incubation, acceleration, and even raising and exiting because of the startups that they supported, first of all, started off as shared spaces, right? So you have these weird kids or weird people that just feel like, they really want to make something out of whatever it is. If it's tech, if it's putting physical materials together, and then just knowing that there are other people like you that believe that there's something in this, that on its own is just having a safe space. And then even on an existential level for businesses in Nigeria, we have, challenges with things like power, internet, those kind of structural, that lack in some of the structural access, right? So even knowing that, even some people don't have a laptop, right? And, if you're trying to learn design or coding or programming or DevOps, and there's a place where you can go, and there are other people, there's this access to these facilities, all of a sudden, that thing that was just a niggling thought in your head can actually become something. And, I noticed from when I was working in a particular role, and all of my colleagues were from Europe, and I noticed that storytelling was different, because there were certain things that I would never mention, because like for me, it was a given, right? Like if, for instance, I want to tell the story of today, I'm not going to tell you how I woke up and went to, got into traffic. I'm just giving an example. But, I saw that a lot of my colleagues, and some of those steps I would skip, but some of it is part of the story, right? And a lot of my colleagues, their storytelling was more robust. For us, we just want to do it quickly and get it out of the way. But, the storytelling is more robust, it's more holistic. And I looked at it, I was like, okay, there's something here. And I feel like that's part of the thing that we're lacking. The storytelling and us even visualizing it more holistically. And the last thing I want to say is that as Africans, we have a sense of community that not everybody has. And then because it hasn't been studied or promoted, a lot of us just, tend to not consider that or tend to not add value to it. However, if you check the studies on happiness, you see that people that live the longest or have the happiest lives are people that have the best and deepest social networks, which is community, right? So in the same way, this is like for us, it's like an X factor, it's like a comparative advantage, the fact that we can come together, even when we almost have nothing, and come together, rally around each other and build something. I think it's so important, and it's really part of the reason why our hub networks, our hub communities, our hub structures just need to really be solidified, because it's something that we can probably at some point, put in a bottle and ship.
So good. And I was writing here, just my next question was storytelling and the place of storytelling in all of this, because it is the biggest gap. I'm part of the Global Entrepreneurship Network and co-founded the Global Entrepreneurship Network in Algeria. So we built a huge community in Algeria of people, and it was out of nothing. I didn't even know what community building was before, we realized it afterwards. Oh, that's what happened. Actually, it was building a community of number of people who just came together to be creative together with almost nothing, just from a corporate sponsor. And we talked about entrepreneurship for a few days, and it just built up from there. And I was part of this Global Entrepreneurship Network where we were at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress and meeting people and just seeing, people from the US doing their storytelling. And I was like, wow, so this is a powerful story. What if I started telling my story? What if my grandmother told her story? What if, in Algeria? And it's just wondering and seeing all these kids in Algeria who grew up during the civil war, became entrepreneurs with a country, corruption in administration and infrastructural power issues and desertification and huge sustainability issues. And we didn't even have water every day. It was once every 4 days. So all of this, and you're like, okay, I didn't even imagine that it was something to be shared, like it was a brick of the story to be told. So you were in marketing. How do you remedy that? Because we know even for the hubs, one of the sustainability part is giving, because storytelling gives value to the stories. It gives dignity to the people who are doing the work. It gives them posture and position and status, This is what we claim also by telling our stories. We claim our own value and we state it instead of expecting the world to give it to us, right? It's just, I'm affirming that I am that and I am valuable and my people are valuable, and what we want to create is deserving on something. That's how powerful storytelling is. And I would love to know your take on how to bring the storytelling part in the work we're doing into entrepreneurial support, and especially how it emerges with your work today.
Okay, awesome. So I completely agree with what you're saying. I actually recently said something similar, and the word skipped me that day, and someone gave me from the crowd, and it's validation. Storytelling, reading people's stories and telling your stories helps to validate you. It basically lets you know there's someone else, that went through this thing that I'm going through and they made it, and so I can make it. It also gives context to people that are outside of your setting. Just like you said, you have all of these macro challenges, and still you're building this business. How is that possible? I have a friend who recently relocated to the UK, and she went to see a therapist after living in the UK for like 3 years. And she's in her mid-40s. And the therapist said, I cannot believe that you've gone through all of this and you've never spoken to anybody. Because, for us here, we're so used to, making do, if there's one challenge, then we just have to roll with the punches. So how are we going to get out of this? What's the next thing? We're so used to that we don't even know that in some people's contexts, it's very different. It's very strange. You know, a few years ago, someone was unraveling the story of, you know, a lot of the big entrepreneurs and tech bros, to be able to say, these people didn't start poor. These people didn't, they didn't have, for instance, power issues, at least not most of them. Do you understand? They didn't have desertification. They didn't have water once every 4 days. They didn't have lights, maybe. There's certain places, you know, maybe for months they don't have power, but the people in this place are innovating, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you're so used to something, then it doesn't become something to discuss. It doesn't become something to tell, right? So, so it's two things that I'm going to say. One is that, and I've skipped mentioning it every time I mention collaborations, I keep forgetting, and it's really an indictment on my part. One of the important collaborations that we need to grow is collaborations with the media, because even though social media marketing is, you know, ubiquitous, everybody can do it. The fact of the matter is, when you are, and again, because I've been in that position, and even the business that I was running, I was also running the social media, because for me, that was like the easiest thing, you know, like, yeah, I could do that in my sleep. But a lot of people, it's not that easy for them. So a lot of people don't have that track record. They don't have that visibility. You can't see the line of their story, right? And again, we also feel, again, by modeling the West, a lot of entrepreneurs feel they don't have anything to tell until it's pretty, right? So my version 1, my version 0.5, my version 2, this is not what I should share. I should get to version 5 and be like, hey, this is me. But that is all part of your storytelling. That is all part of the journey and the chronology of your product, of your business. So it's one of the things that we want to, and again, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of we don't lack for numbers in Nigeria. We don't lack for numbers, but a lot of our businesses and even our hubs are at the, you know, we're at the bottom line of the Maslow hierarchy, right? We're just struggling for survival. We're just, you know, we're at the need stage. So we need to move as many people as possible from need stage, so that we can now start, you know, not just,
desire stage, pleasure stage.
Yes, you know, and self-fulfillment stage. That's what we need to get to, so that, you know, people can, if we're creating now out of need, imagine what happens when we're all creating at mass, at scale, at self-fulfillment stage or at desire stage. Like, I want to create this because I can, because I want to. Not
because I love it, because it's fulfilling.
Because people love it, because people need it, but not because people would like to have it, not because people need it. And I need to do something that people need because I need to get the next 1 million customers. Like, we need to help, you know, develop that continuum of support to be able to move startups and hubs from that bottom line. And I had a conversation with someone the other time, and he was saying how we were saying how there needs to be that handshake between public money and private money, right? So at some point we need to get government and development partners to be able to support, to bring us to a certain level. Of course, all businesses must be revenue driven, must have a sustainable business model. But if we're building and we have that support early on, and we have a continuum of support, and part of the continuum of support is getting customers, right? So if, for instance, and I'm going to speak on a panel tomorrow, and one of the things I'm going to be talking about is driving sustainability of small businesses by having access to public procurement processes. If you're able to, you know, support small businesses by ensuring that they have, government is the biggest procurement customer, usually anywhere in the world. If you're able to open up that for small businesses, then they have sustainable revenue, then they can be sustainable and grow. Same thing with the hubs that are supporting them. So we need to have that continuum. And again, we need to look at it from a larger strategic point of view. If you're not looking at it like, oh, I want to make sure that the access to, for instance, public procurement is very tight. You can still make it very tight, but make it accessible. Yeah. If you're looking at it that you're trying to drive entrepreneurship, you're trying to drive local content, you're trying as much as possible. If I can buy product X from a local company and not spend dollars buying from another company, that should be our policy, right? And if product X right now is 60 or 70% of the quality of product X or product Y that's been imported, we shouldn't just say, oh, it's not the same quality. That's fine, but they're not really operating in the same system. What we should do is, how do we bring that? What can we do to support that business so that I can bring its quality up, and then we can buy from that business? If we do that, all of a sudden we're creating jobs, we're creating industries, we're driving verticals, we're also retaining our local currencies. You know, if you buy a product abroad, you bought a product abroad. If you buy a product locally, you're supporting families, communities, value chains locally that are driving your economy, you know, engaging you, supporting women and children, you know, growing tax base. And there's just that ripple effect. So if we have a very holistic and strategic view that, you know, these hubs, these startups are not just creating products, they're not just doing incubations or programs or having communities, they're actually doing economic development and driving the economy, then I think a lot of us will start looking at them as, you know, almost a diamond base and not, oh, it's just hubs or it's just startups. I think we'll look at it as a real resource and as the way to be able to channel the resource that is Africa's use.
100%. Yeah. I was just thinking of these hubs they are in the front line also communicating with this youth that everybody is talking about without having any relationship to it directly. And the hubs are in the front line, like they're doing the community work, they're doing the economic development, they're doing, and shifting from the need stage to the joy stage, pleasure stage is a paradigm shift. Like building a customer base is not the end game, it's the byproduct of service, right? It's the byproduct of service, or like thriving business is the byproduct of me having fun into going to my business and building something. And for that to happen, we need the ground that is safety, and safety comes from community and like a strong structure.
Yeah. And also peer networks. I think one of the most underlooked resources is peer networks. The fact that you, first of all, can see someone that's slightly ahead of you, but, you know, not too far that you can relate, but far enough that, you know, you're encouraged. And then there are other people at your level as well that you can say, listen, I don't understand this thing, without feeling stupid, or can you help me with this thing? Or you just have that, you know, almost symbiotic relationship. Everybody wants to help everybody. Again, this has always been the basis of African society. The fact that it hasn't been studied, hasn't been documented, isn't being replicated in other places doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or it doesn't work.
Exactly.
And this is what we're seeing being replicated naturally in these communities. You know, so it's so important. And you're so right. Nobody really knows. We have this youth, nobody really knows how to engage them, right? What percentage of the youth are going into higher institutions? Very low. So what happens to the rest? They form communities, and those communities can be around sport, can be around entrepreneurship, can be around, you know, social or communal spaces. If we channel all of that, then again, that's another thing that the hubs can be. They can be like a training ground, almost like the last the last place you can catch the youth, right? And you can instill certain things in them. One of the things that we've started talking about this year and we want to go into action in 2022 is developing programs to help hubs incorporate good behavior in startups. What do I mean by that? Two things right now that we're looking at, circularity and ecological consciousness. We want to create a program where the hubs are able, as part of their incubation or programmatic delivery, or even part of their community activities, can let entrepreneurs and startups know, even from incubation stage, when you start thinking of your business, you need to start thinking of the waste element and what you're going to do with your waste. How can you build ecologically conscious businesses from the ground up? This is one of the places where we can catch them and teach them that it's our responsibility. You know, we have an ongoing climate crisis. What can we do? The hubs can incorporate that consciousness into their startups just by being in that space, right? And also, you know, having structured programs to help them. The second thing is political engagement, voter engagement specifically. A lot of our youth are apathetic towards the political process. We know what happened last year in October. The youth they don't really have a trust element in the government, and so by extension, they don't have a trust element in the electoral process. But if, as a community, we're able to say, listen, did you know that, you know, as a person, as a national of this country, a person over the age of 18, this is what you're entitled to, and this is what you're responsible to do. You're responsible to vote, you're responsible to pay your taxes, you're responsible to be a good social citizen. You know, a lot of people don't have, it's not necessarily a part of our curriculum. It is now civic engagement, but for those that didn't have that training when they were in secondary school, who's teaching them civic engagement? Who's teaching them voter responsibility? Who's teaching them how to hold their personnel, the people that they voted for, who's teaching them how to hold them accountable? Because there are processes for these things in the law. And again, coming from our previous military background, those of us that didn't, a lot of the younger people have grown up within a democratic setting. For those that are older, we didn't. So we may not even also have that consciousness of what it means to live in a democratic setting. Right, and then we can't now mirror that behavior necessarily for the people behind us. So we're widening the gap of voter apathy. This is an opportunity for us to close that gap by providing that voter engagement, that training, to be able to say, capitalism, for instance, is the mother of democracy. It's not the other way around. Business drives politics. So here we see, for instance, that a lot of people are like, oh, I want to focus on my business. I'm not interested in policy. I'm not interested in politics. But one policy can kill 100,000 businesses. So it is in your best interest to know, not necessarily go for political office, but know how it is you can engage with policy so that, you know, it is proactive. There's proactive engagement and is a co-creation process, just like we've recently seen with the Nigeria Startup Bill. You know, we all need to be more involved. And who's going to tell these people? Is their communities, their peer networks, and their hubs.
This is the new way of doing. I think it's a good way to end also, like the bottom-up approach in application, how to start from the bottom up and how it looks like. It's exactly like this. And it's replicable in business, in politics, in everything we want to take it. It's the only way to go now. Like the pyramid cannot function anymore. Yeah. The top-down approach is dead.
Yeah. And government is not going to come and do these things, right? Private sector, you know, the people in the corporations, they're not going to come and do it. It's us that are in the entrepreneurial space, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're the ones that are seeing, like you said, we're the ones closest to this youth, we're the ones closest to these communities. We need to have some kind of system to be able to build the Africa and our individual countries that we want to see. It's not going to happen by chance. Nobody's going to come and save us. Nobody's going to come and build it for us. We need to be very deliberate to say, for instance, I want everybody from my hub, I want them to know how to do X, Y, and Z to make them better citizens. I want them to not just know how to build businesses, but to also build their communities. I want them to have a sense of responsibility, not just for their businesses, not just for their communities, but also for their environment. These are the places where we're going to have those conversations and create those cultures that hopefully the next unicorns, the next billionaires, zillionaire businesses are going to carry into their careers, into their businesses, and into the world.
Thank you so much, Nneka. It was such a good conversation. Would you like to add something to close this? How would you like to close this conversation?
Africa has the youngest youth population in the world. Nigeria has the highest Black population in the world. We have the highest population in Africa. We need to have a strategic outlook on how we're going to engage our youth. Our youth is an invaluable resource. There are continents that are looking to have our youth, and they're working to get our youth, and there's a very active brain drain happening right now. And that in itself should be enough indication of the value that our youth can bring to our countries and our economy if other people are trying to poach them. So we need to have a strategic way to engage these youth. If you look at all the systems that are available, not everybody can go to school, not everybody can learn a skill. And even for those that are going to learn a skill, where are they going to learn the skill? The biggest engager of our youth will always be entrepreneurship. And there have to be people that we teach and support them in that entrepreneurship. And as it is right now, previously we had apprentice systems, and apprenticeship systems have shown us that having mentorship and a guided curriculum and also a larger network increases the likelihood of success of businesses. And we've had apprenticeship systems for centuries, for as long as Africa has existed. So let us look at how to support hubs, because they're like a modern version of this. They're creating communities, providing programmatic delivery, providing access to networks, providing peer networks to help our youth create solutions, learn skills, build businesses, and just become better people to live more qualitative lives. So find a hub near you and look for how to support them. There's several ways. So support a hub and let's build Africa.
Yeah, create the irresistible futures we are all striving for.
Absolutely.
Thank you for these words.